Imagine drifting alone for 76 days with nothing but a sun-bleached hull and a will to live. I've spent years chasing the most insane human stories on Earth, and today I pulled together 6 of the most jaw-dropping survival tales I've ever seen. We open with a man who survived 76 days at sea, and if that doesn't grab you, wait until you hear what comes next. These 6 stories are brutal, intimate, and completely true. Everyone backed by records, interviews, and first-hand accounts. You'll meet people who made impossible choices, who improvised life from nothing, and who returned changed. Every story here is true. Sources cited in the description. Imagine drifting alone for 76 days with nothing but a sun-bleached hull and a will to live. That's how this chapter begins, because that's exactly what Stephen Callahan faced. I can barely picture the first day when the small sailboat ruptured and the world he knew sank beneath him. He fashioned a life raft from what remained of his vessel, cobbling materials together with a focus that felt like survival instinct turned into craft. He rigged a sail to steer when there was wind and lashed makeshift oars when there wasn't. Water was the enemy and the prize. He collected rain and canvas, rationed what he had, and tricked his mind into treating every drop like gold. Fishing became ritual. He caught fish with a spear of aluminum hooks made from studs, each catch teaching him the ocean's rhythms. Navigating was both art and madness. He used the sun by day, stars by night, and a battered sense of hope that kept him moving toward anything that might mean rescue. He describes boredom as lethal. Days stretched into identical suns and nights, and the mind invents storms when the body is quiet. He fought off hallucinations and the cold creep of despair by keeping a schedule. He brewed a routine of repairs, fishing, and logging coordinates. The raft itself became a companion. He learned every squeak, patch, and flap, naming leaks like threats to be outwitted. He set snares for flying fish and created a simple desalination attempt. On days with rain, he became ecstatic, almost childish, because the world's kindness had returned for a moment. When he finally sighted a ship, the relief was almost comic. Happiness collapsed into silence, then hysterical gratitude. His rescue was documented, messy and miraculous, and his memoir lays out every detail with the precision of someone who survived by remembering clearly. Trapped with a boulder pinning his arm, Aaron Ralston faced a decision no one should ever have to make, and he chose survival in the most brutal, deliberate way. I remember reading his account and flinching at the detail. 5 days pinned, dwindling supplies, a body that screamed for release. He was alone in a canyon, his right arm crushed beneath an 800-pound boulder, and every attempt to free it failed. He tried lever after lever, rope, sticks, and then the canyon's walls seemed to close in, both physically and mentally. He rationed water, food, wrote messages on his camera, and filmed his own final moments as if the act of recording might extend his life. The desperation of those hours created an ugly calculus, live with the anchor of a limb or do the unthinkable and sever it to live. When he made the choice, he did not flinch from the mechanics. He used a dull multi-tool, adrenaline, and an iron will, and the procedure took hours of grinding, cutting, and blood loss. It was not cinematic. It was a raw, messy, excruciating effort that left him weak, but alive. After freeing himself, he still had to hike miles out of the canyon, improvise a tourniquet, and crawl until he found a road. People imagine the end moment as the whole story, but the aftermath was equally brutal. Infection risk, blood loss, and the body's long rebuilding. The ship went down, and Poon Lim ended up alone on a life raft for 133 days, longer than any of the other sea stories except the 76-day case we opened with, and his methods were astonishingly resourceful. He salvaged what he could from the wreck, fashioning a canvas cover and traps. He collected rainwater in every container he could find, even using cloth to funnel droplets into jars. Fishing became not just food, but a ritual. He set lines, baited hooks with small bits of scraps, and learned to spot birds to predict fish schools. When fish weren't enough, he turned to birds and meteors of the sea, snaring anything that landed within reach. Sharks circled, testing boundaries. He kept them at bay with oar strikes and lit fires on flammable scraps to create smoke barriers. He rationed ruthlessly, understanding that conserving a little could mean surviving another crucial week. He kept a meticulous log to stave off despair, marking days and events with the precision of someone who knew the mind could unravel faster than the body. The rescue that finally found him was almost accidental. A ship noticing the tiny, tattered silhouette against the vast horizon. Naval records and interviews with Poon Lim confirmed the raw numbers and his survival techniques. She fell from a plane and lived. That sounds insane, until you read her testimony and hear her voice. The plane broke apart above the Amazon. She plunged 2 miles through rain, through trees, through chaos, then cradled by branches that slowed her descent. Her injuries were severe: a broken collarbone, a deep gash, and a concussion. But somehow the jungle did not finish her off. Alone and weakened, she had to make impossible decisions about where to go and how to move through a labyrinth of green. She followed streams downstream, knowing that water often leads to people. She taught herself to treat the jungle's threats: infection, predators, and exhaustion. Her every step was a negotiation with pain. She used what she had: a small bag, a knowledge of basic first aid from school materials, and an instinctive calm that bordered on spiritual acceptance. When rescuers finally found her, she was both a miracle and a riddle. How could a young woman so injured survive so long without succumbing? On the shoulder of Everest, Beck Weathers was caught in a storm that turned the mountain into a graveyard and left him for dead, but he clawed back from a level of exposure that defies belief. During a catastrophic summit push, a blizzard separated climbers and forced impossible decisions about oxygen time who could be helped. Weathers suffered severe frostbite hypoxia and the kind of cognitive slip that makes the world both slow and noisy. He was left behind when others presumed him beyond help, and for hours he teetered between consciousness and death, at times lucid enough to realize he may not survive. His survival began with a small, stubborn act. He forced himself into motion, staggering over ice and into the margins of consciousness to find shelter. Miraculous is the only word people want to use, but there were concrete elements too. Brief weather windows, intermittent care from other climbers who returned medical evacuations with helicopter medevac. His partial recovery was gruesome and heroic. His hands and nose were amputated, and he underwent multiple reconstructive surgeries to return to anything resembling normal life. The hospitals recorded the injuries. The summit logs recorded the timings. And his interviews recorded the soul-level cost. For a man who nearly died on the world's highest slopes, his survival became both a medical case study and a meditation on what it means to be given a second chance. Mauro Prosperi disappeared into the Sahara during the Marathon des Sables and returned with a story that reads like myth. He survived extreme heat, dehydration, disorientation in the world's most brutal desert. He got lost during a sandstorm, wandered for days without proper supplies. Checkpoints he once trusted vanished in the white noise of blowing sand. He improvised shelter in shallow dunes, tried to ration water he didn't have, and in the end made desperate choices about consuming what he could find. At one point, he reportedly drank from the blood of animals and scavenged what he could stomach to stave off total collapse. His body betrayed him and then betrayed the logic of giving up. He kept moving even when each step felt like a small death. He navigated by stars sometimes, by exhaustion other times, and by a stubborn hope that a town or a person might appear over the next ridge. When he was found, he was near death, but alive, the product of extreme adaptability and the kind of tenacity only crisis can sculpt. Race records and interviews with Prosperi document timelines, the weather conditions, and his own account of what he ate and how he navigated toward rescue. From 76 days at sea to weeks in the jungle, these are survival at its extremes. We met 6 people who faced impossible circumstances and did one thing in common: they refused to accept the end. Each story gives a different map of making it through. Crafting rafts, cutting flesh to live, rationing rain, following rivers, stealing minutes from storms. walking across deserts with cracked lips and burning eyes. If you take anything from these tales, let it be this. Survival is often boring, repetitive, and built on tiny decisions repeated until they become a life. These people. Sources are linked below. Subscribe for more true survival stories every week.